One of my North Indian friends recently asked me a question. Hey, do you guys actually separate newlyweds during Ashadha? My answer was a simple smile and yes, expecting more questions from him. Then he asked, why? And that's where the interesting part begins. Because for the people this day, it may sound superstitious. Some say it's simply a tradition, some say it's not an auspicious time for the newly married couple to stay together, and in some families, the custom becomes even more specific. Either the bride or the groom are not supposed to cross the same doorway or come face to face with their respective in laws, mother in law. Honestly, for today's generation, this can easily sound like superstition. But wait, is it really just that? Let's go back to the world in which this tradition was actually being followed. Welcome to Timire Samhari, the soul of Bharat. Ashadha generally falls around mid June or July, and this is the time where the monsoon arrives in most parts of India. And for us today, rain might simply mean traffic jams, chai, reels, and working from home. But imagine living a few hundred years ago when the entire family's livelihood depended on the rain. The first rains arrive, the soil becomes workable, ploughing begins, seeds have to be sown, and depending on the crop and the region, other agricultural activities may also have to happen at this time or at the right time. There were no tractors, no weather apps telling you exactly when the rain would arrive, and no modern irrigation systems available everywhere. And there was also no guarantee that if you missed the agricultural window today, you could simply postpone it to next week. Timing mattered the most, and labor mattered too. The entire family should be involved in this agrarian cycle, and now imagine a young couple newly got married, excited about beginning their newly married life. But at the same time, the monsoon has arrived and the fields are waiting. So, sending the newly married woman temporarily to her mother's home would have a very practical and the social side to it. She gets time to spend with her parents, and the new household gets some breathing space to concentrate on their seasonal agricultural work. One possible explanation is that avoiding conception during this period could mean avoiding a pregnancy whose later stages or childbirth may coincide with the hot weather conditions, and it is practically difficult because in those era there were medical care was limited, transportation was difficult, and the families depended much more heavily on their own community and the relatives. Can we prove that this was original reason why this custom was created? No. The timing of the pregnancy and the childbirth could have been one of the considerations behind such seasonal customs. I don't want to tell you that ancient Indians knew modern science so they invented this rule. No. We simply don't have enough evidence to make that claim, and that distinction is most important. A possible explanation is not automatically the historical origin of a tradition. If the intention was simply stay apart for some time, why did the rules sometime become so strict? Why do they say don't stay in the same house, don't cross the same doorway, don't meet? Why turn it into something almost like a rule book? Well, think about how the traditions work. Suppose your grandparents and great grandparents simply told everyone that during this month the newly married couple should stay apart. Would everyone follow it? Maybe or maybe not. But give people a clear boundary. Don't cross this doorway. And now everyone remembers it. A simple social arrangement can gradually become a ritual. And once it is linked to the beliefs, it is repeated generation after generation, and people remember the rule long after they have forgotten the circumstances in which that rule has actually developed. And there's another beautiful side to this. Think about the bride. She has left her family in which she grew up, has spent her entire life knowing the people, the customs, and the way of living in that house, and suddenly she is into a new family, new people, new responsibilities, new expectations, and sometimes completely different customs and practices. She may have certain questions and doubts and may not have developed much rapport with the new family to ask everything openly. If we have a doubt, we have many more resources. You can simply call your mother, you can simply call someone or refer to some subject online. We have social media. We can talk to someone almost instantly. But that world didn't exist then. And particularly for a young married woman, there may have been many things about the married life that she was simply not comfortable discussing before marriage. So, going back to her parents' home for a relatively longer period could have given her something very valuable, a safe space to talk, to ask questions, clear doubts, and understand this new phase of life, spend time with her mother, reconnect with her family, and perhaps even to bridge the emotional gap between the life she had just left and the life she was now beginning. Or maybe this custom wasn't only about separating a husband and a wife. Maybe it also gave a young woman an opportunity to return temporarily to a familiar support system at a very important transition in her life. And this is what makes traditional practices fascinating. Perhaps one custom can have several meanings at the same time: season, agriculture, family, social responsibilities, emotional support, and eventually it becomes a ritual. A custom doesn't necessarily have to have a single reason, and that's something we often forget when we look at the older traditions. But here's where I want to draw a line. We shouldn't say everything our ancestors did was scientific. And neither we should say if we can't prove a scientific reason, it must be a superstition. Both are very easy conclusions to draw. Maybe some practices had some practical benefits, and some may have been developed because of social circumstances, or some may have acquired religious significance over time. And for some, maybe we simply don't know the reason. And saying we don't know doesn't make our heritage weaker. Every custom, every ritual, every culture, and every civilization has unexplored parts. And it simply makes our understanding more honest. And perhaps a rule that made perfect sense in a particular society and a particular period may need to be re examined in a completely different era. Because the circumstances have changed, the system of agriculture has changed, healthcare, family structure, communication, society, everything has changed. And this is where the broader idea of dharma becomes interesting. Dharma is not simply about blindly repeating an action, it is about understanding what is appropriate and right in a particular context. So instead of asking only, is this scientific? Perhaps we can ask a better question: what was happening around the people who followed this tradition, and what was happening to their environment, to their agricultural cycle, their family structure, and what did the tradition itself mean to them? Because when you start looking at traditions this way, something fascinating happens. Because when you start looking at traditions this way, you simply stop looking at them as rules to blindly follow or superstitions to blindly reject. Instead, you start seeing them as pieces of much larger story. The story of how people lived, adapted, believed, and made meaning from the world around them. And perhaps that's one of the most interesting things about Sanatana Dharma and its wide established culture. Different practices, customs, regions, different ways of expressing devotion, but all becoming part of one enormous civilizational landscape. Because unity does not necessarily mean uniformity. And now, I'm curious about your region. Do you have any traditional practice that sounds strange today, but your grandparents or earlier generations have followed? Maybe a custom during a month, a local festival, a marriage related practice, or something connected with agriculture, or even a practice that your family followed during monsoon. Tell me your region and name that practice in the comment box below, and I would pick some of the most interesting ones and explore their story and possible reasoning in the upcoming episodes. Because at Timira Samhari, we believe that our traditions are not just the things to follow, they are the stories waiting to be understood. We will be back with another interesting concept and video. Till then, namaste.